Now there's long been a push in the market for sort of lighter and lighter bikes, and no one wants to be pedaling a tank uphill, but can actually that heavier bike play any benefit when going back down? Well, today we're going to have a little look by adding weights and doing a few tests to the bike to see what a light bike versus a heavy bike is like out on the trail. Sounds like I'm riding on a waterbed! So before we dive in too deep, let's do some jargon busting. Now we're going to be talking about sprung and unsprung weight. Both of these are really going to affect how your bike performs, especially the suspension. But what the heck are they? Let's find out. In a nutshell, the components that are not affected by the suspension are unsprung. This includes the fork lowers, wheels, tyres and rotors. Sprung weight is all the other components that affect the suspension. Now the larger the ratio of sprung mass to unsprung mass that there is, the more stable the ride is going to be and the less you're going to feel it on those rougher trails. A good example of this is if you've ever been on an e-bike, those sort of extra batteries and the extra weight that are on those creates a much more stable ride and sort of seems almost to smooth out the trail a little bit. So we're going to try and change the ratio of sprung to unsprung mass to see what effects it has on the trails by adding weights in different places. But I think it's time we went and did that, so let's get back to the van. So let's take a look at today's setup. Now, guys in the past have experimented with putting weights on their bike, people like Chris Porter amongst others. They've tried putting weights down low around the bottom bracket and also high up on the stem. Now, for the purposes of today's experiment, we are going to have a go at both. So, to keep things as fair and simple as possible, we're going to be using the same bike. I've got my reactor here. We're going to be using these little weights on our first setup. Now, they're 500 grams a piece. We've got 4 of them, so that's an extra 2 kilos in weight, which we're going to be attaching around the bottom bracket area and also up near the stem to test our sprung mass. Now for our second weighted setup, we are going to need another set of wheels. So let's see what we can get. Oh, perfect. I don't know where they came from. So this is our second set of wheels. They are a slightly different set of wheels, but virtually the same in weight once the rotors are added. And we've also kept the tyres exactly the same to try and sort of minimise the differences. The only difference is, in these, there's about 2 kilograms of water across the pair. Now that is a lot of extra unsprung mass to be sloshing around and feel on the trail. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that's like. That's a lot of weight. It's a lot of water sloshing around. Should be fun. Now it's time to get those all-important numbers and do a little bit of weighing, but for that we need a bike. Oh, perfect. The first weigh-in is the bike with no additional weights. It's completely stock, so let's see what we have. As you can see, with our additional weights strapped around the bottom bracket and stem, we've added just over the 2 kilogram mark, including the straps onto the bike. Now for our third setup, this is with our weighted wheels, so let's get her on the scales and see what it weighs. So I thought I put 2 kilos of water across the wheels. Turns out I may have slightly mismeasured, and actually we got 3.5 kilos of water in there, which will just make it more fun, I think. Cool, so it is testing time. Now, just to keep things as fair and even as possible, I'm not changing tyre pressures at all on either wheel set, and also my suspension settings are what I would normally run, so I'm not altering that with any of the added weight, which should be really interesting. So for test 1, we are doing a braking challenge. Now I'm going to be starting up the hill and coming down at a fair old speed, keeping the same speed each time on my Garmin here, and we've got this little log as our marker, and we're going to jam the brakes on there, and I think for each one see see how long it takes to stop. It could be an interesting experiment, I think, this one. Right, so we are dropping in, currently doing 15 mile an hour, and woo! We braked. A little heavy on the front, but we got it. Just need to measure up and see what it was. Okay, that was actually a really interesting test. As you can see, I've stopped not a lot further than stock bike, if you like, and that is with the additional sprung weight. And what was really noticeable actually was the back end didn't pick up and the front end didn't go as light under heavy braking. So it's actually a really interesting test for, you know, the added weight, not much difference in braking. Let's get up to speed. Oh, nice. Okay, I would say that's bang on the same as stock bike. Maybe even a little bit before. Interesting. And I think, again, you had so much weight low down, you really had the grip and the confidence to pull the brakes really hard, knowing the front end wasn't going to wash out, and the back end's kind of, although picked up, stayed under control. So very interesting test, that one. Yeah, cool. I like it. So time for our second test, and this is a climbing challenge. So again, with all three different setups, we're going to start from where our log finish was for our braking test, and we're going to climb about 100 meters up that way to where the boards are, if you can see them, and really check out which one is going to be the slowest off the mark maybe, or once it gets going it's going to be okay. And I think this one could really throw up some interesting numbers. Right, 3, 2, 1, go! Woo! Nice. Well, that's my normal bike, sprinted. It feels pretty good, so I don't think the mods are going to be able to beat that one. We'll see. 3, 2, 1. Oh my God. But you can definitely feel the added weight coming off the line. Just getting it going is a big noticeable difference. But I think we're all good. Okay, right, final test time. Water in the wheels. This is going to be interesting. Let's have a go. All right, 3, 2, 1. Absolute tank off the start. Oh my Lord. She does not go well off the line, I'll give it that. I think we may have found the Achilles heel in unsprung mass. And that is hard to get it going. Whew. So now it's time for our third and final test, and what I think could be possibly the most interesting, and that is a real world test. Now we're here, we've got about a minute downhill run, and we're going to try all three of our setups on it and compare the numbers, but I think this is where the two different weighted setups could really come into their own and sort of have the biggest effect on the bike here. Okay, so I've just finished my second run. This is with the weights to make it a higher ratio towards a sprung, and there's a noticeable difference. Going down, it feels so much more planted and sturdy, but on the way back up, I got to admit, she's a bit of a dog to get up the hills with the extra weight. Oh my God. It sounds like I'm riding on a waterbed. The handling's awful. Oh my God. Feels like I'm riding a blancmange. Oh my Lord. I'm gonna die. So that was our final run on our little downhill course with water in the wheel, so more unsprung weight. And I gotta be honest, it was not very fun. It sounded like I was riding on a waterbed, and it just felt funny. At slow speeds, because the amount of water, the centrifugal force just made the bike sort of sway from side to side almost. And it just made it really hard to maneuver the bike. So I think there might be something in that if you would experiment with the amount of liquid in there. But for the purposes of this test, it was not very fun. But we've got some good numbers, so I think it's now time to throw it back to the shed, crunch some digits and see what we got. So we are back here in the shed, and boy did I crunch a lot of numbers. So let's firstly take a look at bike weights. Now my stock bike, no weights on it, as you saw it, 14.5 kilos. When we strap the weights on, just over 2 kilos extra, so that was 16.5. Now with the water, this was the biggest increase. So from 14.5 kilos, my bike jumped up to a whopping 18.06 kilograms. So a real big difference in weight there, which I think is going to make a massive difference climbing, that's for sure. So test one, this was our braking challenge. Now interestingly, bike one, which is my stock bike, managed to stop in 18.5 feet. Bike two, which was our sprung weight, was 22 feet. And actually, bike three was 21.5 feet, and that was the bike with the water in the wheels. With that added weight, it did give a lot more stability, so the front wheel wasn't sort of washing, the back end was more like controlled and was able to keep it like almost lower to the ground and get on the brakes better. So quite an interesting there. I still think if you played around with the weight there, you could probably find a bit of a sweet spot. Test two, and this was our climbing challenge. Now over our set distance on each three, my stock bike climbed in 7.7 seconds. Bike number two, our sprung weight was 8.2 seconds, so about 0.5 slower, and I think this was always going to be a given, having a heavier bike. Interestingly, bike three, so our weighted wheels, was again another 0.5 of a second slower, so in total a whole second slower over under 10 seconds is quite a big gap. And the reason for that is with such a large rotational mass to get going, it was just so slow off the line and to get up to speed. There was just too many forces in there to get it going and get that water rotating. Once it got up to speed, it was okay, but off the line, she was a bit of a dog. So third and finally, our trail challenge. Now we rode a very familiar piece of trail, one that I've ridden many times. I thought it was about a minute long. It's actually a little bit shorter, more like around the 40-second mark. But again, bike one, smashed it 38 seconds down it. Bike two, so this is our sprung weight again with our weight strapped around the stem and the bottom bracket. That was 41 seconds. Now the interesting thing here, although it's 3 seconds slower, the bike felt a lot more composed and controlled under braking over rougher sections. So actually it made a very big difference there. I think having a play around with how much weight could really sort of find a sweet spot in that, and I think that could be the most effective. Now bike three, again, our weighted wheels, our unsprung mass, 46 seconds, very slow. And the reason for that is on this particular section of trail anyway, it's not the quickest, so getting up to speed is harder, as we've sort of discussed with our climbing challenge, but also the feel of it, the such a large amount of water sloshing around in the tyres, the forces that throws around just made the bike feel actually unstable, especially in the air. And therefore, yeah, 46 seconds. So in total, 8 seconds slower, which on something that short is a massive amount of time. Okay, so let's summarize kind of and go through what we've learned here. Now, my stock bike,
I'm very used to, very comfortable on it, and no surprising, it kind of came out trumps every single time. What was surprising is the sprung weight, which is adding the weights to the stem and bottom bracket and things like that. I definitely think there's something in that. I think if you played around with positioning and the amount of weight, you could probably, you know, get some definite benefits from that. So when climbing back up, once you've done your downhill runs, I'll be honest, both unsprung and sprung additional weight was noticeable. It drags more, you're just riding up slow, it's just harder work because you're carrying more weight, obviously. But the descents, I definitely think that the sprung weight has a lot of potential, as obviously a lot of people have tested previously. Whether you play around with how much weight you put on there, then if you've got time, delving a little deeper into suspension setup and tyre pressures, I think you could really find an optimal setup. Overall, I'd probably keep my bike stock. I'm not going to be adding any weights to it soon because it's an all-day trail bike. I don't want to be carrying any additional weight. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. And if you've got any comments or if you've tried adding weight to your bike, let us know in the comments. It'd be great to hear. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up, click subscribe. And if you want to keep watching GMBN, well, just have a click on the videos now.